My son stood at his graduation dinner, tapped his glass with a fork, and said 5 words that snapped something I didn't know could break. My mom is a failure. The room went dead quiet. 50 people, family, friends, his professors, classmates turned their heads toward me like I'd been dragged into a spotlight I hadn't asked for. At his side, his girlfriend held her phone up, recording, the corners of her mouth lifting in a smug little curve that made my stomach sink. My name is Marianne Cole, and I didn't realize until that moment that you can give someone everything you have and still end up as their punchline. It started 23 years earlier, the night Evan was 2 years old and asleep in his crib. My husband Graham packed a duffel bag and walked out without a speech or a fight. No note, no apology, just the sound of the door closing and the sudden emptiness of a home that had never felt big enough until it was too big for one. 3 weeks later, the divorce papers arrived with a check that barely covered half a month's rent. I was 28 with a business degree I'd never used the way I'd imagined, a toddler who needed me like air, and $417 in my checking account. My parents were gone. Graham's family decided the collapse of our marriage had to be my fault. I had no siblings, no safety net, just me and a little boy who still reached for me in the dark. I found a job as an administrative assistant at a medical supply company because it came with health insurance and hours that didn't punish you for having a child. The pay was thin, but thin was better than nothing. For 18 years, I watched younger employees leapfrog over me, people who could stay late, travel for trainings, make themselves visible. I couldn't. Evan had fevers and school concerts and homework and nights when he woke crying because he dreamed his father forgot his face. We lived in a 1-bedroom walk-up where sirens sang through the windows like a lullaby nobody asked for. Evan got the bedroom. I slept on a pull-out couch that never pulled out properly, springs pressing into my spine like a reminder to keep going. I told myself it was temporary. Everything was temporary. Everything was for him. I packed lunches every morning. I helped with homework every night. On weekends, I did medical billing at our kitchen table until my eyes burned and my fingers cramped. While other mothers went to book clubs and dinners, I sat under a harsh lamp entering codes, building a college fund out of stubbornness and sore wrists. Evan was brilliant. Teachers said it like a verdict. Gifted program, honor roll, scholarships. When he earned a full ride for his undergraduate degree, I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. But he wanted more, a top MBA program, 2 years, a price tag that didn't care how hard you'd work to be poor. So I took out loans. I cashed in what little retirement I had. I sold my car and rode the bus. I picked up a night job cleaning offices. My body began to ache as if it resented me for the bargains I kept making. But every time I sent money to Evan, I told myself I was winning. Because mothers like me measure victory in receipts. Evan met Sloan during his first semester of the MBA program. She came from a world that didn't flinch at numbers, the kind of family with more than one house and the casual confidence of people who've never had to calculate whether a flat tire means skipping groceries. Her father owned a chain of luxury car dealerships. Sloan had never worked a day in her life, and why would she? Money worked for her, multiplying quietly while she slept. The first time Evan brought her to my apartment, she stood in the doorway as if she'd crossed into a historical reenactment. She didn't insult me outright, not with words you could quote. She didn't have to. Her eyes did the work, taking in the scuffed floor, the tired couch, the small kitchen table where I'd spent years chasing a future I couldn't afford to dream for myself. She sat on the edge of the cushion like fabric could stain her, touched nothing, smiled too brightly, left after exactly 23 minutes. After that, Evan stopped inviting me places where his new life lived. He'd suggest coffee shops near my job, never near his campus, never near his apartment. He stopped calling me Mom when his classmates were around. I became Marianne if he introduced me at all. I told myself it was normal, that he was young and trying to fit into a crowd that spoke a different language. That embarrassment was just a phase you outgrew. I gave him grace I hadn't earned and he hadn't asked for. The graduation dinner was Sloan's idea. She insisted on Giovanni's, an Italian restaurant downtown where the cheapest entree cost more than my usual weekly groceries. I'd looked at the menu online and felt my throat tighten. Evan called and said, "Don't worry about the cost. Sloane's parents are covering most of it. We just need you to chip in $300 for your portion." $300. I'd been working 60-hour weeks between my two jobs, and even so, my bank account never looked healthy. But this was his MBA graduation, the finish line I'd bled for. So I took an extra shift. I ate what I could stretch. I scraped the money together with the same old reflex. Yes, of course. Whatever you need. I arrived early, wearing the one good dress I owned, a navy blue thing I'd bought 7 years ago for a wedding and recycled for every important day since. The seams were starting to show their age, but I stood tall anyway. I refused to apologize with my posture. The private dining room was decorated in the school colors, balloons bobbing above a crowd of 50. People drifted with wine glasses and laughter that sounded expensive. Sloane's parents held court at the far end, her father's booming voice filling the space like he owned the air. Evan stood with his classmates, all in sleek suits, all polished, all looking like they'd never had to choose between rent and medicine. When Evan saw me, something flickered across his face. Not joy, not pride, something closer to shame. "Mom," he said, walking over. He did use the word, but it landed cold. "You made it." "Of course I did," I told him, reaching for a hug. He gave me an awkward side hug, already turning away before I could hold him properly. Then Sloane slid in beside him, her arms wrapping his waist like a claim. "Marianne," she said brightly, "so glad you could come." Her smile was all teeth. "I love your dress. Is it vintage?" I held her gaze and kept my voice steady. "Thank you." Dinner began. I sat near the back with Evan's classmates and their parents, people who discussed vacation homes and investment portfolios as casually as the weather. I cut my chicken into small pieces, stretching the meal not because it wasn't enough, but because old habits don't disappear just because the tablecloth is white. Then the speeches started, and I felt, in my bones, that something was about to go wrong. Sloane's father stood first, lifting his glass with the ease of a man who'd never had to practice confidence. He spoke about leadership, legacy, and building the kind of life you can be proud to pass down. People nodded like it was scripture. Then Sloane rose, her phone finally lowered, her voice sweet as syrup. She praised Evan's brilliance, their shared vision, their plans to move to New York, where he'd work for her father's company and help expand the brand. She said empire like it was romantic. I waited for Evan to say my name, not because I needed a medal, not because I wanted the room to clap for me, just one sentence, a small acknowledgement that the woman at the back table had not appeared out of nowhere, that I hadn't been background furniture in his life, that I'd carried him here. Evan stood, straightened his tie, and tapped his glass. The room quieted. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," he began. "Getting my MBA was the hardest thing I've ever done, and I couldn't have done it without the support of people who believed in me." He thanked his professors, he thanked his classmates, he thanked Sloane's parents for showing me what success looks like. He thanked Sloane for standing by me, then he looked at me. The room seemed to lean forward. My chest tightened with a foolish, aching hope. I sat up straighter, hands folded so no one could see them tremble. "I also want to address something," Evan said, and his voice shifted firmer, sharper, as if he'd been waiting to say this. "There's been a lot of talk about sacrifice and hard work, and I think it's important to be honest." Something in me went cold. I saw Sloane out of the corner of my eye. Her phone was back up, recording again, her expression anticipating. "My mom is a failure," Evan said clearly. It didn't feel like words. It felt like being shoved. He went on, and each sentence landed like another blow. "She spent her life making excuses, blaming my father for leaving, blaming her circumstances, never taking responsibility for her choices." Forks froze in midair. Glasses hovered. Someone's laugh died in their throat. "Stop clapping for her," he said, and no one had been clapping. "Stop pretending working menial jobs is some kind of virtue. She had opportunities and wasted them. She had a business degree and did nothing with it. She chose to be a victim." Sloane's smirk deepened. That was the worst part, realizing it wasn't just Evan. This was performance. This was coordinated. The filming wasn't accidental. The humiliation was the point. "I'm grateful for what she did," Evan added. And somehow that hurt more than the insults. But let's be clear, I succeeded despite her, not because of her. I'm standing here because I refuse to accept mediocrity, because Sloane and her family showed me what ambition looks like. He raised his glass. Here's to success, real success, and leaving behind the mentality of victimhood and poverty. A few people lifted their glasses uncertainly, as if unsure whether refusing would make them part of the scene. Most just stared at me, waiting for my reaction, waiting for the spectacle to continue. My legs shook, but I stood. For a moment I looked at my son, this stranger wearing Evan's face, wearing the suit I'd helped pay for, speaking a language he'd learned from people who thought kindness was weakness. I saw with sudden clarity that his shame wasn't temporary. It wasn't a phase. It was a choice he'd made and rehearsed. "Excuse me," I said quietly. No dramatic speech, no sobbing, no thrown wine. I simply walked out. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, hands locked around the steering wheel. My fingers ached arthritis from years of typing and scrubbing, proof of every sacrifice he'd just called failure. My phone buzzed. A text from Evan. "Mom, you're being dramatic. Come back inside." I drove home instead, and I cried for the first time since Graham left. A week passed in a fog of routine. I went to my day job, then my night job, then home to silence. I kept replaying Evan's voice in my head like it had branded itself onto my skin. I didn't hear from him until exactly 7 days after the dinner. He called on a Wednesday while I was scrubbing a toilet in an office building that smelled like lemon cleaner and stale air. "Hey, Mom," Evan said, casual, as if we'd last spoken about the weather. "How are you?" "I'm fine," I lied, because telling the truth felt like handing him something else to step on. "Good. Listen, I need to talk to you about something." He cleared his throat. "Sloane and I decided to move up the wedding. We want it this summer instead of next year." He still hadn't apologized. Not once. "We're looking at venues," he continued, "and weddings are expensive. Sloane's parents are covering most of it, but there are extra costs. I was hoping you could help out." My hand paused mid-scrub. Help out how? I was thinking maybe $15,000. He said it like he was asking me to spot him lunch money. "You could take out another loan or something. You've still got some retirement accounts you haven't touched, right?" 15,000. From the woman he'd called a failure while his girlfriend recorded my face. "Evan," I said slowly, "where would I get $15,000? "I don't know, Mom. Figure it out. You always do." His tone sharpened. "That's what you're good at, making sacrifices." Something inside me snapped, but it didn't feel like breaking. It felt like a knot loosening. "No," I said. "What?" I said, "No, I'm not giving you $15,000 for your wedding." He laughed, actually laughed. "Come on, don't be ridiculous." "So is calling me a failure in front of 50 people, I said. My voice surprised me with how steady it sounded. "This is about the dinner," he scoffed. "God, you're so sensitive. It was a joke." "It wasn't a joke to me." "Fine, I'm sorry," he said quickly, flatly. "Okay, I'm sorry. Now can we talk about the money?" There it was. The apology like a receipt dispensed only to get what he wanted. "No," I told him. "Not 15,000, not 1,500, not 15 cents. His silence turned heavy, then his voice hardened. "So that's it? You're cutting me off?" "One mistake," I repeated softly. "Evan, you've been cutting me out for 2 years. I'm just finally accepting it." He sputtered anger, then threats. "You'll regret this." "No," I said, and I meant it. "I don't think I will." I hung up and finished cleaning that office, my hands shaking not from fear but from relief. At home, I looked at my apartment, at the couch I'd slept on, at the table where I'd worked nights for years, and I made a decision. The next morning, I asked HR for a meeting. I applied for a management role I'd avoided for nearly 2 decades because I couldn't travel or stay late. "My circumstances have changed," I said. 2 weeks later, I interviewed. 3 weeks after that, I got the position, more pay, better benefits, actual vacation time. I bought a real bed. I quit the night job. I began rebuilding a life that wasn't shaped like my son's needs. 3 months of silence passed until a lawyer called. Evan had filed a lawsuit against me. He claimed I'd manipulated him, that I owed him repayment, that I damaged him with guilt. He also filed for a restraining order, alleging harassment. He was trying to erase my love and turn it into a crime. I hired a family lawyer on a payment plan and walked into court with phone records, witnesses, and the truth. The judge denied the restraining order and sanctioned Evan for filing something frivolous. The lawsuit was dismissed as baseless. He was ordered to pay my legal fees. Not long after, word spread that Sloan's video hadn't made them admired. It had made them feared. His job offer vanished. Their wedding money dried up. Then one night, Evan showed up at my door, crying, smaller than I remembered, asking for his mother. "I forgive you," I told him, "but forgiveness doesn't mean I save you." He begged. I loved him. Both were true. So I gave him the last lesson I had left. "Figure it out," I said, "the way I did," and I closed the door.